It's the conversation we had yesterday with Sean about trading Jarome Iginla to bring in Joe Nieuwendyk, which turned out to work for both franchises. They won a Stanley Cup. There's no telling for sure, but I think it's safe to say Nieuwendyk was a pretty darn important part of that Stanley Cup.
For sure. I want to say we wouldn't have won the Cup without that move, but there were other things all added up to that.
It wasn't just the Nieuwendyk move, but it was a very important one.
At the time, there was a GM very similar to here, and they know each other well. And Bob was piecing this together, not just that year. It was leading up. You could see what was happening with us, especially the guys that had played in Montreal, because all of a sudden, here comes a former Canadian, then here comes another Canadian, then here comes another guy from Montreal that kind of went through, maybe not that year, but went through that system, because there was a belief that the way that we were kind of groomed in Montreal was kind of the way to play at that particular time in our era. And it paid off. And so, Jarome moves on and he has his chance and he's a Hall of Famer and everything else like that. I don't think he won a cup, but, he's still a great player. But
he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer.
Bloods. William W. Williams says, was one cup worth losing a franchise player?
Yeah, and I don't know if a franchise player guarantees you a cup. You know what I'm saying? Like, Rick Nash was a franchise player. So, I mean, we could go down the line. And, I think it's just who's driving the bus. And, if you want to take that swing and you're at the door and you're knocking on the door, I can tell you, Mr. Hicks had called the general manager and said at the time, what's going to get us past Detroit? And the answer was Brett Hull. And he goes, go get him. Now, it wasn't
different time.
There was no salary, salary cap, all that kind of stuff. It was go get him. Is that being said now? I don't know. Probably not. There has to be more thinking that goes into it, and the bean counters have to do all their thing. But owners want championships.
The answer is yes. It was worth it, and that's no slight on Jarome Iginla, who is.
And we can talk about it because it worked out. And the guy that he says go get him, and it's worth it, scores the goal.
Yeah. And that's Brett Hull scores in Game 6.
Yeah.
I'll give you a correlation with football. The LA Rams a couple of years ago traded Jared Goff, their number one first round pick, to Detroit for Matthew Stafford. It was a huge move. They really bet the farm, and they won a Super Bowl, and it paid off. Jared Goff has been really good with the Lions. They have this big resurgence now. Lions one of the best teams in football. The Rams have that Super Bowl. That's it. You won. It was worth it. They may not win another Super Bowl in the next decade or two. Who knows? But they won one, and it's worth it. A championship. Yeah. That's why you show up, right? Yep. And it's okay to admit it. I've heard some coaches say this in soccer too, Luds, so don't hate this, of saying it's okay to say we're here to win a title, not just we're here to do well and make the playoffs. We're here to win a title. It's okay to talk like that.
And even the players that are in the room, and it could be a friend of yours that is getting traded for a certain player to come in, they appreciate it because they know, we feel, the players feel that, you know what, those guys upstairs are doing everything they possibly can to give us an opportunity to win. Good friend that has to leave or whatever it may be. I felt bad for Charles. I mean, I think it happened to Charles a couple times, and Billy Heward, somebody like that. Like, they're here, and 2 years later, there's a championship, and they sat there and they fight for their teammates every single game, and then they get moved down the road and they just miss it because of that. But I guess it's part of doing business.
Well, think about all the great players in the history of the NHL who have retired. John, get your bell ready, without winning a Stanley Cup. What do you think it means to Matt Duchene to have an opportunity to win a Stanley Cup? What do you think about Jamie Benn, who literally was in the bubble final and could, we saw that shot of him sitting alone in the dressing room in Edmonton after getting bounced by the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games. What do you think it would have meant to Joe Pavelski? What would he have given to hoist a cup before he retired? Like that. Tyler Seguin says, his rookie year, he wins a cup with Boston. There you go, John. I gave you a little love tonight. 2011. He said, I was too young to really appreciate it. He goes, it was fun, but we were in they went back to a final a couple years later. Here they are thinking that this is Boston. We do it every year. Well, he hasn't won one since 2011. It's now 2024, 25. And he has said, I think he told me 2 or 3 years ago, how much more he would appreciate it the second time. We have a 2-timer right here.
Mhm.
What did that second one mean compared to the first one, just because you knew how hard it was to get back?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was yesterday or today we talked about this, is that Tyler and I were when I looked at how long it was in between Tyler's first one and when he had an opportunity with another one, it just happened to be the same years. And I'm going back a year or so. And I'm like, man, it's been 13 years when I thought of that, because you get to your 10th year, your 11th year, your 12th year, in between I'm talking about. And that was my 17th year or whatever it was, but it was 13 years in between. You don't think you're not going to get that chance to win it. And the year that we won it here was different than the year that we won it in Montreal. I didn't think we were the best team in the NHL when we won it in Montreal. We had a great goaltender. We had Patrick Waugh.
But when you won it, did you think you might have another one or another chance for one at that point in the, 87?
That was in 85.
Oh, 85. Okay.
Yeah, it was 85. I was too young to, I was like my third year.
But would you have thought, I'll probably get back to another
when you
final.
play in Montreal, you think you're going to win it every year.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. And then, but when
Boston
you
was
move
the same
down,
way for Sagan.
but then all of a sudden it gets further and further. The lights in the rearview mirror you can barely see anymore, and you think that they're over with. And then you get there, and so that's why I think for Tyler, like it kind of what you described. I didn't know how important it was. Well, I'll be honest with you. I knew how important it was to the fans in Montreal when it was the parade, and I saw. I think there was 1.5 million people on the street, and there was no security, there's no barriers, there's nothing.
Then, I mean, if it hadn't already, when you're in that parade and you see all those people in Montreal, did you go, "Oh wow, it really is a big deal," or had you already known that?
No, that's when I realized how important it was to them. I mean, and if I drove down St. Catherine Street from where we started to where the Forum is, I can get there in 15 minutes. It took us 7 hours. And there were 2 guys per car in a convertible car, and but the people were on top of your car, and there were people coming out of the bar. I was in a car with Rick Green. I had 17 bottles of Dom Perignon on the floorboards in the car that we were in by the time we got back to the Forum.
Good grief.
And and the cars were trashed. Every car was trashed, not because they were vandalized. It was because they were just all there. You know how it is. And then you had to go into the Forum for the presentation, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's when it kind of hit me how important it was to the fans, just the fan, not the people in the suits. That's a different story that were in Montreal dressed up in the stands. So anyway, and then you go, like I said, then you go for a long time and you don't. And then for me, I retired, and honestly, I got a call to come back the next year.
In 2000.
Yes. I got a call to come back. And that's the year that, Jersey beat them here. And I was coaching our minor league team. And it's funny. I don't even want to go there. I don't want to go
memories.
there. Yeah. So,
emotions are dug back up. But the point is that it absolutely is so crucial to then you do what you need to do if you can win. It's worth it. And isn't it great that your team is in a position for you to consider to take those risks, those shots, whether it's a trade or a free agent signing, you're adding this guy, you're doing that, you have a chance. The Stars are in this era right now where they are contenders. They're a really good team. Yes, we're going to have those ups and downs, but boy, it's so much better to be in this conversation of you have a legit chance to contend and maybe win a Stanley Cup this year. That doesn't happen all the time. A lot of times it's, do you make a trade to just make sure you get in?
Or do you sign Jaromir Jagr so that you're at the floor cap when you go in bankruptcy? That wasn't too long ago. Let's remember that. So it's a good thing to be looking at these options. And the only reason I brought that up and asked Luds is prospects and young players aren't guaranteed that they're going to pay out. Cup windows aren't guaranteed. It could be over in the blink of an eye. So that's why I wanted to ask Luds that question, because I completely agree. You need to go 100% for a championship when you have the shot for it.